I'd like to call this Wednesday, March the 2024 City Council meeting open. Today we'll have the invocation by Ulysses Mooring from First African Baptist Church.
Let us all stand, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you this afternoon, Lord, with an humble heart and an humble spirit. We come, O Heavenly Father, asking you to be in the presence of this commission meeting. Lord, allow your will to be done in all times. Allow the presence to be felt in decisions and anything that may come. Lord, you are here and you are present. We just you now and ask your blessings upon the commissioners, all are involved. In Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Amen.
Are there any addendums on the agenda today?
Ms. Commissioner, I do have one addendum to our meeting this evening. I'd like to make a motion to add an agenda item under consider for approval, item number 3A, consider approval defined benefit pension plan sponsor motion for affirmative information, of the plan trustee.
Can I get a motion to approve the addendum?
Second.
All right, motion approved to make the addendum for moving item 3A to the agenda under item number 3.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make changes to the agenda. I'd like for item number 5. I'm sorry. Item number 5, move that we defer the approval of resolution number 2024-4 in support of the introduction of a local act to provide for a homestead exemption for ad valorem tax property taxes assessed by the city of Brunswick until further.
All right.
Second.
So we are deferring item number 5.
Yes.
Second.
All right. All right, so I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda for March the 20th, 2024 regular scheduled meeting.
Give me 1 second here. So you deferred 5?
Yes.
Yes.
And so there was a motion and then a second. And so we would all have to vote to defer that. So all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
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 All those opposed, the same.
Aye.
One opposed. That will now defer item 5. Any additional addendums or subtractions?
No.
Hearing none, we will open it for a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
Aye.
the same. All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes and the agenda is adopted. We will now move on to public comment. How you doing this evening?
Good, good. Mayor, the commission, Dave Bowers, 523 Reynolds, 2 more months as a PAC member, ending 6 years. Tonight I'm here to speak to you about, again, Route 17 phases 2 and 3. I don't think it has a name yet, but specifically about the route. I reviewed your tape and your very in-depth discussion about the particular public improvement, the roundabout. We didn't get to see much of it, and therefore, I guess I'm trying to catch up now. And all of you had very good questions, and we'll understand as it would come back to you. If it's a public improvement with right-of-way, then it needs to have an agreement between the city and the developer. If it's a public improvement in the right-of-way, I would ask that you make sure it's bonded. And I would also ask that you, when you do approve it, or if you approve it, that you do not allow them to occupy any of the cottages or sell any of the condominiums until this improves in place and becomes a property of the city. I think we got into some issues at the harbor by seeing lots before things were done. I think we've had some other issues. And again, this thing we need is the Riverside folks in here saying, when's this going to be done? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers, and thank you for your service on the board. Wonderful. We will now move into our appointment schedule, and URA has 2 appointments. Both of these are mayoral appointments. I'm going to make one appointment this evening and another at the next meeting. So we are not making both of these appointments tonight, but one. So I will be reappointing Michael Butcher to his position. He was previously on the URA, has served in the capacity of chair and others. So Michael Butcher will be immediately reappointed, and we will come back to that additional appointment at the next meeting. We'll now move on to discussion, which is establishment / framework for Park and Rec Development Board. City Manager McDuffie.
Good evening. At the last meeting, the mayor and commission requested that a framework for a recreation development board be presented. And this is for discussion and review only. I have up on the screen information regarding what has been proposed at this point. The Recreation Development Board would be named City of Brunswick Recreation Development and would be created by the mayor and commissioners. The purpose of the board is to develop funding opportunities to support programs and activities of the City Recreation Department. The board will work to host events, create funding opportunities, support regional activities, and solicit sponsorships to support the department. The board will also provide opportunities to educate and engage the community about ongoing recreational activities. Trying to see. Further authority granted to the board would be outlined in the bylaws. The board will serve solely to provide financial support to the department. The citizens that serve will not be involved in making policy and will not have any responsibility or direct involvement with the day-to-day operation of the department. Okay. Periodically, the board may be asked to provide feedback and input on the schedule of programs and activities offered by the department. The board will be organized exclusively for charitable educational purposes and will obtain a nonprofit status of Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1980 as amended, or the corresponding provisions of any future United States internal revenue laws. The board shall initially consist of 7 members, each of whom shall be current or former residents of the City of Brunswick, graduates of local high schools, or persons with direct affiliations to our recreation department, including coaches, parents, and teachers. The board consists of members of the community with involvement in financial management, youth programming, nonprofit organization, business development, education, and fundraising. The board members shall be appointed to 3-year terms with 2 or 3-year appointments. The initial board to establish a staggered rotation system. Office of the board shall consist of a chairperson, vice chair, and a secretary. No member or officer of the board shall receive compensation for their service, but may be reimbursed for expenses relative to training and or board-approved activities. Meetings shall be held monthly. Committees shall be appointed as necessary to carry out the mission of the board as directed by the city. The board shall work to establish at least 2 major activities and/or fundraising events each year. This is the framework that has been developed, of course, for discussion and review. And I think, more details will be developed as input and feedback is given. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Appreciate that. Thank you for the work that you've put in. I want to open it up for any questions or comments from what's being shown to us this evening. Any idea to grow it? I know in the conversations that I've had with Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem Harris, there was a board in the past that was to the Parks and Rec department. So if there is any historical knowledge that we would need to get out there to make sure this board is doing work that it needs to do, we would love to hear that. But if there's any questions or comments for city manager, we open it.
Ms. McDuffie, now when you said that the makeup of the board includes any parent that's involved or have a child involved in city recreation, so that means they could be living outside the city limits or only in the city?
Well, this is something that, I think the commission should give consideration and direction. We are including parents who live in or outside the city, okay, based on, their children participating in the program.
Okay, that offers a wider variety. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
I just would like to say thanks for your hard work, and this is obviously a very big step for us, and I think you're hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that, we need to look at other opportunities to help support this program and grow it and make it stronger and better for our kids. So we have a large section of our population that is involved in other nonprofits and in fundraising activities that I think would like to participate on this board. So I'm looking forward to some to fruition. Yeah,
okay. And let me say that I have not spoken with the attorney, or he's not given input. So we will have to go through, looking at the legalities and everything and developing more specifics in terms of the action of the board.
Appreciate you. Any additional questions? Hearing none.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
This is Mayor Pro Tem Harris. Mine is just that I'm going to reserve my comments for a more thorough review of this information, because I'm just seeing this.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for putting it together.
Wonderful. We will now move on to items to consider for approval. Approval of March 2024 regularly scheduled meeting minutes. We'll open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes submitted by staff.
I second.
Hearing a first and a second, all in favor show by the usual sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We will now move on to city attorney item. Consider approval of an
We added that, Mr. Mayor. That to be
3A. Okay, I apologize about that. We will now move on to 3A. Consider approval of defined benefit pension plan sponsor. I think is that you as well?
I'll introduce it.
Okay.
Actually, as most of you know, the pension plan for the city of Brunswick has its own counsel, Clayton Cartwright. He is on the call virtually. He will be discussing the necessity of this motion affirming kind of the structure so that we can make sure that payments are being rendered from the pension plan. So I'll let Clay take it over from here.
Thank you so much, Brian, and many thanks to the commission as well for adding this to the agenda quickly here. This is an item that I became aware of earlier this week. With the resignation of the city finance director, the former city finance director at the end of February, documents that Charles Schwab, which is the primary custodian of plan assets, the assets of the defined benefit pension plan, needed to be updated. And so the plan, the plan document provides for one single trustee. It's a three-headed monster if you want to, if you want to you sort of be graphic about it. It is the city manager, the HR director, which traditionally over the past few years has been the assistant city manager in charge of HR, and the finance director. They are one single trustee. They act by terms of vote, and if there's only two individuals occupying those positions, they have to have unanimous approval. So those documents of Charles Schwab had to be updated to add Ms. McDuffie and Mr. Berquist here. In conjunction with adding that, Charles Schwab also required one of three documents from the city. I have the curse of, well, the blessing of being plan counsel since 2006, but also the curse of going through this process with Schwab back in 2011. And knowing that process here, the only document that they really would glide through is a resolution from the city commission that basically states what's already in your plan document. And so before you should have a motion, a recommended motion with 3 bullet points. They're all affirmations. Nothing is being done to the pension plan. The pension plan is not being amended here. Nobody's changing anything formally in terms of, thank you, Ms. McDuffie, for adding that. Nobody's changing anything when it comes to the plan document. This is not a plan amendment. All the verbs are affirm, affirm, affirm. So to be clear, this just makes it obvious to Charles Schwab what we have in place. And it's easier to provide a motion that's 1 page to Charles Schwab than a 6-page lawyer's letter. Okay, and we all know what lawyers' letters look like. And so it's easier just to provide that from the plan sponsor, which is the city commission. So the first bullet point there is an affirmation that, like I just said, we only have 1 trustee, it has 3 components, and nothing's being amended. That any references otherwise or may seem to conflict with that, you disregard that. This is what's happening. The plan document's not being amended. The second one is it's just making it clear about Mr. Berquist's role here as assistant city manager in charge of HR. I've had to draft similar language before in conjunction with Schwab to make that clear that he is one component of the trustee. And then the third point is just affirming that currently we only have 2 members of the trustee itself, Ms. McDuffie and Mr. Berquist. Again, there are no changes that are being made to the plan document. Here, of course, if there are any additional internal controls or anything issues that the city commission would like to address with me, I'm happy to entertain those, though those would be independent of this motion. This would be the only motion that we would be providing to Charles Schwab. And with that, I'm happy to address any questions or concerns or any requests for additional information from the city commission.
Thank you, Clay. Questions from the commission?
Clay, this is Commissioner Atkinson Williams.
Yes,
I would like to know how can we address in our having amend for more internal control? Because right now in our current situation, we have our CM and ACM
right,
as the only main trustees. So because we do not have a finance director. So we need maybe a third party or something to ensure that we have more control.
Sure. And so my recommendation would be, I completely understand. I started my career, my professional career is in audit, in information systems audit. And so I often say I'm an auditor in lawyer's clothing. I thought I ran away from that career 30 years ago and it caught up with me. So I completely understand the internal control issue here. My recommendation would not be to amend the plan document, but provide additional information to the city commission. For example, there are monthly statements that are provided from Charles Schwab. Here, those can be provided to the commissioners. You, Commissioner Atkinson Williams, who serves on the pension committee, also Mayor Pro Tem Harris as well can get copies of those statements here. That's one way of doing it. You could provide it to your auditor as well. I mean, you can also, it might be easier as well to get those to the actuary. It might be more efficient for purposes of the actuary's work. And the actuary is the professional firm that has to value the plan annually and generates calculations. It might be easier, more efficient for him to get the monthly statements here. So we can provide additional information to third parties here that are connected with the plan in order to provide additional assurance to the city. But I completely understand that. I mean, you know, not having a finance director, you know, creates an issue here. And with that transition, I've given additional scrutiny as plan counsel to the operations of the plan, not to say anything bad is going on, but with any transition, it's an inflection point. I mean, you have to look at those things and realize, okay, making sure that the trains run on time, trains not going off the track, trains not going backwards here, that it's going the way it should. And maybe that means for the next few weeks, it goes a little slower than usual, but we want to make sure things go on track, that plan funds are invested in a, you know, as they should be by an investment manager who's also a bonded fiduciary. And so those are ways we could address that here, and I'm happy to discuss those and put those procedures in place. I would not recommend changing the trustee, the definition of trustee, just from a fiduciary bonding standpoint here. I don't think we would want to name a city commissioner to serve as trustee, you know, serve as part of the trustee here because of the liability concerns. And certainly I think we would want to keep it sort of as is, unless you have another third party here that's inside the city, like another department director who could serve as that as well. But then we'd have to go through and perform some surgery on the plan document, which I'm not so sure that's really worth the expense and the trouble.
Could city clerk or a city attorney serve?
Yes, they could. They could. I mean, if they do that, I mean, you could have them serve and not be part of the pension committee here, but I mean, by default, they would have to attend, they should be attending pension committee meetings. I mean, right now, I mean, the pension committees consist of the two commissioners are appointed, you and Mayor Pro Tem Harris, the city manager, the HR director, which is the assistant city manager, and the vacant position of finance director, along with 2 employee representatives. And so that would stay the same. That's actually the pension advisory committee. That would stay the same here under the plan document. And you could amend the plan document to add, say, the city attorney, though. With all due respect to Mr. Corey, I'm not so sure, you know, that's really somebody that's in the area of his core competency here. And so it's even for me as plan counsel, I mean, I couldn't serve as plan counsel as serve it on the pension, you know, excuse me, as part of the trustee here. That would be, you know, an internal conflict on my end. But I mean, you could, I mean, if there's somebody who fills the role of a controller, anything else, or somebody you want to add to that, we could make a revision to that definition here. I mean, we could add that in the event of a vacancy, that there could be a third party appointed by the commission, though we have to be very careful of who we appoint.
Clay, also, how long do you think we should go as being vacant and this position as financial director vacant, or how it will affect this trustee, this plan right here? Should we 6 months, 3 months, or I mean, before we might just consider to add someone else, a third party on the plan?
Sure. No, I understand the context of the question here. I mean, here I would say that we're going right now, Commissioner Atkinson Williams, we are going through the valuation process with the plan's actuary. Usually that process that produces a valuation report. You'll see your first one in May because it goes to all the city commissioners here. And so if we are able to produce that on time here and with good data, and that we know calculations are being processed, you know, generally on time, and notices are being given to participants there, then that's a good sign that we probably don't have to make a change here, and that things are running okay. They're in good standing. If not, then yes, I think at that point we would have to consider an addition here, and you know, because people can't do everything. You know, I learned that lesson in my 20s by my mentor, my recently deceased mentor of 28 years. And that is that you define yourself as much by what you don't do, you know, and just focus on what you do well here. And so that may be an issue that we'd have to look at. And I'm happy to bring this up as an agenda item here with the next pension committee meeting or be called back before the city commission. I mean, I'm your servant. I mean, I represent the plan, but I'm answerable to the city commission, which represents the city as plan sponsor here. And so I'm happy to have those discussions either before the city commission directly or with commissioners individually here. But I mean, everything's on the table here in terms of internal controls.
Well, as you know, Kathy was our former finance director. If we have her on as a consultant, could she be added back to this plan? A consultant financial director?
Yeah, I mean, she wouldn't be finance director, but we could amend the plan. And what I would do is I would state in the plan doc and have an amendment that would say that would provide for an interim appointment that's there, you know, by the city commission and give the city commission flexibility. So if she were to stay on as a third party independent contractor consultant, now keep in mind, she's part of a fiduciary. And so she may not want to take on this role as trustee because there may be an issue of, you know, professional liability insurance. I mean, she is a CPA. And so she may have to have a discussion with any insurance carriers providing her insurance. But if she were to agree, we could amend the plan document to tweak the plan document to provide the flexibility to add another member. And we could either go with 4 or 3. You know, she would be serving. Kathy Mills would be serving at the pleasure of the city commission.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
So Clay, this is Mayor Pro Tem. So with the last possibility of Kathy being a remaining party trustee, you're saying that she would have to procure her own liability insurance?
Well, I mean, if I were in that situation, her shoes, I would have discussions about, you know, what discussions if she has liability insurance with her carrier here. I mean, I think she still does some part-time CPA work on her own individually and see if she has that insurance, or maybe she needs to procure insurance or what have you. Or she may say the exposure is so low that there's no issue. Or, you know, part of her consulting agreement with the city is that she's indemnified, you know, in this. Yeah.
Could there not be an indemnification clause put into there? I'm just asking these questions because I'm not sure.
Sure.
I'm not sure about the in-depth conversation that's been held with Kathy regarding this potential. But on the internal control mechanisms that you had previously mentioned about potentially the actuary or someone else, are those temporary measures that you're mentioning?
No, not really. I mean, I would think that I mean, it's not a bad idea for statements to go to your city commission members. I mean, they have to hold them in confidence that's there and only share them with the city commission. But, you know, Mayor Pro Tem Harris, if you got those statements and Commissioner Atkinson Williams received those statements, that would be something that there's no reason to remove that here. It's another control that's there. And I mean, you know, everyone is an honest player here, but when you're dealing with, there's always good for an internal control environment to know that there are other eyes that are on this and they're looking at this. And so, and catching and maybe having queries about things. And I'm happy to entertain those queries. Having the actuary get those statements that provides a monthly statement provides an additional internal control. And it also makes it easier for the actuary. It puts the actuary ahead of the game in doing their annual valuation. And Mayor Pro Tem Harris, you've been through those meetings with the actuary before, and so you know the detail that goes into those reports.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess my only concern with reducing it would be reducing it from the 3-person accountability checks and balances to just 2 people. I'm not comfortable with just having just 2 people I think there needs to be more checks and more accountability, and to have that third person that will also be provide us with that with those cross checks of the internal control mechanisms. Because I know on our audit reports we often get dinged for those control and the mingling of the responsibilities. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing those as we should be addressing those, to make sure that the auditors are satisfied or comfortable with how we're doing things across the board. So I wouldn't be comfortable with just having two people. Not saying that Jeremiah, shouldn't be one of those persons, because he already is, but I wouldn't be comfortable with with reducing it to two people.
Sure. And to be clear, I mean, the plan document, I mean, what the motion states is really the interpretation of the plan document as is. And so if the city wants to add, wants to have that language, I can provide language and an amendment in order to provide flexibility to the city, to the city commission to add another member to the trustee. We can do that here. This motion right now is a reflection of how things are, and it's necessary to Schwab to make sure that the trains run on time here. And so I think these comments are wonderful. I love having these comments here. From a professional standpoint, I think they're great. This is great brainstorming here. I think we need to have the motion in place so that we can give that to Schwab and say, this is where things are now, so they can continue to do that. And I can come back to the city and to the city commission and give language and draft an amendment to the definition of plan trustee that provides a lot of flexibility in the hands of the city commission to modify that definition here. And that way we can, we're able to move forward. Now, if we do that, we may have to give an updated resolution to Schwab, but we can include that. I can include that in the package with the plan amendment.
Okay. Hold on 1 second.
Yes, sir.
City manager, I think, has a response to that question. Then Lance has a question.
I just want to say that in terms of internal controls, I normally had all the swaps. It's not like this is lessening as the plan is concerned, because Charles Schwab then meetings with them. So really transactions stay the same, and this is not but I have a problem with what's being said. The only thing is, I'm hopeful that we'll have some place so we can reestablish this as soon as.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll say that number one, I ask my fellow commissioners and the other members of this pension board and appreciate you expressing concerns and wanting to make sure we have solid internal controls, and I think that's super important for us. I also feel like that what I'm hearing or what I'm interpreting from our council is that we need to move forward on this in order to make sure that we get proper payments processed and what have you. So I would ask would be that I'm not sure, to be frank, how often your committee meets, but I would love for a recommendation back from your board to say, hey, we definitely think we need to add a third person, or the language that gives the ability to add a third person, and then even maybe some recommendations on who that might be, and then we're ready to move forward on that. That's what I.
Thank you for that, Commissioner.
The committee meets once a quarter unless there's a call meeting, but I would like as soon as possible that, and since I serve on the committee, the language be put in, or bringing to us the proposed amendment to add the third party as soon as possible, and then we as a commission to address it.
Okay. So, right, and so we certainly can have a specially called meeting of the pension committee with a draft plan amendment as well. That's good timing because there's another amendment, as you may be aware, Commissioner Atkinson Williams, that needs to come forward that we approved and needs to go before the city commission. And so we'll have two. The other one went to the mandatory distribution threshold. So we'll have two that will go before in sequential order, but I'm happy to have a specially called meeting of the pension committee. It's a joint meeting, the pension committee and the pension advisory committee, to be able to add that language to the definition of plan trustee. We can go ahead and do that. The next regularly called meeting of the pension committee is scheduled for May the 7th, I believe. In which case I believe it's May the 14th. Sorry, not May the 7th, but May the 14th. And so middle of May, which is when the valuation is scheduled to be presented by the actuary. And so I think it's fine that we go ahead and get that specially called meeting sometime within the next 30 days. And I'm saying that just to be small c conservative in terms of timing, but to get that together and present that amendment to the pension committee, pension advisory committee, there to have a vote on it, and then move it up to the city commission to add, to be able to add that language. And again, that designation, I mean, the pension committee, which is what's been referenced as the pension board, but it's officially the pension committee and the pension advisory committee. Those are in this context that those bodies recommend. And so they recommend to the city commission the language. They can recommend or have, give possible names of parties who could serve in this capacity. But again, those parties have to be willing if they're not employees of the city. And so that means, Ms. Mills, for example, would have to be willing to serve in this capacity here. And so I can't speak to the process of getting her to yes here. I can get you the language. I can't vouch for getting a third party non-employee to yes here. And so we just have to keep that in mind.
I agree with all you all. We can do what needs to be done on this, and let's move forward.
Great.
Any additional questions or comments? Few quick questions, one for City Manager, the other for Clay. One, when we bring on the positions that are stated in these amendments, do we have to come back and reassess and redo this all over and to send those amendments back to Charles Schwab, or does it stand as it is written?
No, I mean, if we amend the plan to add the ability, the only thing we would give to Charles Schwab would be an updated resolution that would add the third party to Schwab.
But it would need to come back to us to be approved again.
No, I mean, once you approve the amendment, once the amendment's adopted by the city commission, it's adopted, it becomes part of the plan document. After that, if depending upon once the person's appointed, by the city commission, then there is a resolution that comes back, but it's an affirmation. It's
right.
The same as this one. Yeah, this is just what I'm asking. Yeah, it's an affirmation. I mean, if I may, we're all colleagues here. This is to make it idiot-proof to Charles Schwab of what's going on here. And so you just flash this paper in front of them and say, okay, this is what's happening. This is what the plan says. And it's, from the plan sponsor, so they take it as gospel.
Got it. And as I read the amendment before us, it has 3 people already in these positions, right? So you have the manager, the finance director, and then the human resources director. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's again not an amendment, but the motion. Yeah, it's already point one
inside of the motion. So
yeah.
So my question to staff would, right now we have been, and this is a question for Regina. We have Assistant City Manager Jeremiah Berkowitz filling our Human Resources Director position. Is that going to be a part of his job, or are you actively hiring a Human Resources Director? The reason that's okay.
Yeah.
I think the reason I asked that question is at the end of motion 2, it says pursuant to the plan document, said delegation to the assistant city manager shall expire upon the city's appointment of permanent or interim of a resources director.
Right.
So I guess that in itself confusing wording if Jeremiah is the human resources director.
Well, it's the way the plan document it's so when long ago with like in 2015, I mean, we had a human resources director. That was Bonnie Roberts here, and when she retired, back in 15, there was a question about whether we needed to amend the plan document because we did have assistant city managers who were in charge of HR. And in order to keep flexibility, we just kept it the same here. And so what that means is that to the extent that, Mr. Berquist, there is an HR director who's actually appointed, here, then he steps back as a assistant city manager, and he's no longer part of the trustee. He's no longer part of the trustee. It's the HR director. And that's really the way you want this thing to operate. You want the CEO of the city manager.
I guess what I'm trying to dig into here is there seems to be a differentiation between what the motion is and what the vision of city staff is. If the vision of city staff is that the assistant city manager is always the HR director, then I'm confused as to why we need the language that would say the trustee stuff would be stripped away from that person upon hiring an HR director. So, and this is not a question necessarily for Clay, more of a question for staff.
Well, that was not, I mean, basically, that.
I don't have a problem with it either way. I just want the word to be correct.
Talk about changing the structure of the assistant city manager.
So we at current have no plans to, at current, the assistant city manager is the HR director.
Right.
And so I guess I'm asking the last sentence of that motion, is needed? Is it just taken from boilerplate language?
I would think it would be needed. I mean, if there is a change in direction from the commission, the plan is going to always remain the same. I mean, unless you guys take action to amend it. So if in half a year, the city commission elects and directs the city manager, or the city manager elects to hire a permanent HR director, the plan is going to govern and immediately recognize that HR director as one of the 3 trustee members. Exactly. So you wouldn't need to do anything additional with the language in the motion as it is, because it's sort of an automatic trigger. A permanent HR director is hired.
If the commission decided to have one, it would work.
The hierarchy is changed, or if there's the ability, similar to the finance director. I mean, the plan recognized these 3 positions.
Right.
And as long as there's someone filling those roles at the city, those are going to be 3 people that would make up the trustee. And if at the moment the ACM is filling the role of human resources, if that changes, this would automatically trigger to recognize the human resources department director to be part of that.
Okay.
And that was not necessarily put in for any reason other than for that. There has not been any detailed discussion. There has been questions about what I think that these are there hasn't at all about that.
No worries. And I'm okay with the current language. I wanted to make sure language I was reading it correctly and that I understood it moving forward. Brian, or city attorney, if you could tell us a little bit, or maybe Clay as well, about what's meant when we say keep the trains running. I think we all have an idea of what that means, but I think in the terms of making these motions and move forward tonight, there are some things that need to be done I'm assuming, the trustees. And so talking about what that means publicly, I think.
I'd probably need to defer that to Clay.
Sure. I mean, Schwab right now for for annuity payments and payments that are coming out, the city processes those through a special bank account that it has. The bulk of the assets that are invested by Bowen Hayes, which has been your investment the investment manager for the defined benefit pension plan, which has in excess of $10 million. So they've been your investment manager since 2019. That's invested at Charles Schwab. And so when it comes to being able to fund those payments, and particularly lump sum payments that are elected by terminated participants, usually upon retirement, those have to be drawn down from Charles Schwab here. And so in other words, they have to, those payments have to, those, you have to take a chunk of money out of Schwab, and the investment manager is notified of that because it affects his, affects their investment strategy. That money has to come out and fund those payments here. And so that's what I mean by payment processing and keeping the trains running on time, because if you don't have that, if you're not able to cut those checks from, which is what happened earlier this week, you're not able to cut a check from Schwab to be able to fund fund those payments, then the city has to find another way to fund it here, usually from the general fund on a temporary basis, which is not ideal. You hear it.
Understood. Thank you for that. Last question for me. Do each of these need to be made as an individual motion, or is it a single motion?
I would recommend a single motion here. I mean, this format is the format that I had to use to correct. Unfortunately, I had to correct an issue back in 2011 on this with Schwab on a similar issue, but it was involved at the time the assistant city manager who was acting as city manager. And so, and by the way, that's why that language that provided that language, that's where that came from here. And that was accepted by Schwab here for purposes of that. I think one motion having 3 bullet points, it makes it easy as possible to Charles Schwab to take it and accept it, as opposed to individual ones, which they may have to parse through, or they may lose, or they may flip through. And, it's easier to have it on one sheet of paper, all 3 points.
Perfect. With that, any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mayor, for clarity for me, can you hear me? For clarity for me, just making sure that I'm understanding that what Clay just gave us an explanation on based upon your question and the payments thereof for which we had an incident, is this action a corrective action to move this forward and not have that happen ever again?
That is correct. And so what will occur at once presuming the motion passes, a letter comes from me to Schwab saying this motion passed as planning council, and then I follow up with a copy of the approved minutes here, and then it moves forward. And so we get things in place, ASAP with Schwab as soon as possible with Charles Schwab to make sure that we can continue to function as we have been functioning with Charles Schwab, in order to make sure that we're able to receive those, be able to fund those payments to participants. It's just like going to the bank. No one asks you, or the bank shouldn't ask you when you make a deposit. Anybody can walk in with the deposit slip. So Schwab's taking their money. It's just in order to fund the payments, we've got to put this in place to be able to get the funds from Schwab to fund our benefit payments.
Got it.
Okay, I just want to clarity on that.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. I think hearing, and I don't want to make I can't make a motion, but it seems like the motion would be to move forward on these 3 items, in addition to schedule a pension committee meeting to discuss what further internal controls would look like. Okay.
Correct.
And you would say inside of 30 days?
Yes.
Okay. I can't offer that as a motion, but that
It
is.
won't. Clay, are
Does
we
the-
looking at for our regular scheduling, or are we gonna have a call meeting in April to determine or to discuss more internal controls?
Yeah,
That-
the city commission does not need to call, it doesn't need to act to call, especially. I mean, they're saying you're commanding the pension committee, you're saying here that it needs to call a meeting. And I agree with that. But the pension committee and pension advisory committee, they meet jointly. We can have that meeting called within the next 30 days to discuss internal controls. It doesn't need to be part of the motion. And I would recommend, I mean, if the commission wants to add motions, I would say they need to be added separately, that they just need to pass the affirmation motion. And then if they wanted to say anything else in terms of direction, that's fine, but they should be done in separate motions, different motions.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'll open it for a motion.
We need to do each one
Nope, he said we can do it all together.
all together.
Yep.
Okay. I move that we accept the recommendation that the city commission on behalf of the city as the plan sponsor discuss and approve the following 3 items for affirmation. Numbers 1, per section 1.140 of the City of Brunswick defined benefit pension plan, the city manager, the director, and the human resources director jointly serve as plan trustee, and B, any references to them individually as plans trustee or plan trustee or in conjunction with their joint service as plan trustee under plan section 1.149 and I do not like the said plan. Number 2, affirm that for the sole purpose of plan administration, Jeremiah W. Berquist as the current assistant city manager who oversees the human resources department, is delegated all authority granted to the human resources director under the current plan document, including joint service, in conjunction with the city manager and finance director as plan trustee, provided that pursuant to the plan document said delegation to the assistant city manager shall expire upon the city appointment, permanent or interim, of a human resources director. 3, affirm that pursuant to the plan section 1.149 in conjunction with the current vacancy of the finance director, permanent or interim, Regina M. McDuffie and Jeremiah W. Berquist as the city manager and assistant city manager, respectively, jointly and currently serve as plan trustee.
Good job. Hearing the first, do I hear a second? Hearing the first and the second, all those in favor, show by sign of aye.
Aye.
All of those the same?
Aye.
Mayor, just because that came at a weird time, is that an oppose or an affirm? Aye on yes?
Yeah. Yes. That's an affirmation from me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. We will now move on to city attorney's items. Consider of an intergovernmental agreement between the city of Brunswick and the Brunswick Housing Authority.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Sorry, I'm attempting to share my screen, but apparently I'm... 1 second. Okay. I know I have several items in a row, so best to be efficient. The first item that you have before you is the intergovernmental agreement in the City of Brunswick and the Brunswick Housing Authority. City of Brunswick, between intergovernmental agreement between the City of Brunswick and the Brunswick Housing Authority. For the past many years, the City of Brunswick and the Housing Authority have had a mutually beneficial relationship where the Brunswick Police Department provides what has been called KPAC officers. They're officers that are assigned specifically to the Brunswick Authority properties, and that has always been governed by a intergovernmental agreement between the two parties in which the city is reimbursed salaries, costs, and overtime for the time those officers spent while on duty as a Brunswick Housing Authority officer. I mean, as if they're serving the Brunswick Housing Authority, I mean, they are serving the properties there. And I know you guys are aware in the past several years, we've sort of updated some of our mutual aid agreements. Specifically, we looked at the law enforcement ones with the sheriff and the county when our numbers were a little bit lower. We sort of modernized what a mutual aid agreement between governmental entities would look like. So when the intergovernmental agreement with the housing authority came up related to these police officers, I thought it was an opportunity to work with the housing authority to utilize the more modern mutual agreement that we've just put together in putting one together between the city and the housing authority. The agreement, it contains new terms, but it is doing the exact same thing as it has always been doing, which is providing the enforcement services to Brunswick Housing Authority properties with the same reimbursement from the housing authority to the city. It just modernizes the roles that are being played, the liabilities, how the officers are treated, in terms of how they're viewed as agents of whether the city or the housing authority. They will always remain City of Brunswick police officer. They will remain in City of Brunswick police officer regalia, and they will be at all considered a staff officer. So that is what this intergovernmental intended to do. If there are any specific questions about the terms and conditions contained therein, I'd be happy to answer those.
What does, Brian, what does that like when, I'm asking it, I guess, when it looks like, because you have public housing and then you have apartment complexes, right? So I guess get a little bit nervous because now, are there officers that are designated to housing at this moment?
Yes, there are. There's the city police department in looking at officers that might be best suited for those types of properties. So there's an evaluation, it's an included agreement that they would look at to make sure that they are going to be best for that community in that service and then playing that role. But yes, there are officers assigned to housing properties.
Okay, and I'm just asking this. Okay, public housing, we know, are units that are predominantly African American. So when you say the best officers, will it be officers that look like the population?
I would say that, I mean, that's probably part of an evaluation.
Okay.
I'm not certain to that, but yes, I think it would just be the officer that would best fit community.
Okay. Just wondering.
I have a question. So the compensation that we're receiving from a city perspective is the reasonable base salary and then the benefits package, right? Is there any compensation for equipment reversal, fuel, any of that additional stuff?
Necessary for a new officer to be.
So I think I think we have an opportunity there to evaluate the equipment that we're using for the housing authority then. And I would ask, I know Chief is not here tonight, but maybe that city staff direct the chief maybe to do a little evaluation on that equipment and make sure you get reimbursed appropriately for that equipment.
Assistant City Manager, if you come to the front. Do you have a question? Okay.
Evening.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, the only was it was just it's one officer, so that's the officer who's actually assigned to the that K-PAC unit that serves all the housing authorities. So it's just one officer assigned to that special assignment. of course, anyone within the police department or any public safety, city or county, can respond there for a call for service, but the city police has one officer that's assigned. So I just wanted to make sure that you all are clear on that.
Do you know any special characteristics or that this person inhabits or to make a cap officer? I guess that's cap.
I put the qualified skills. It's 8.4 that's included in the agreement in there, and this is language pulled out of the old agreement as well. But it says all sworn shall be officers who have qualified skills, including but not limited to basic training. The additional ones would be verbal communication, cultural diversity skills, and demonstrated capacity. And demonstrated a capability to relate to the tenants of a community. And so, the decision to place an officer in this role is done through a board where BHA also has input into selecting and sort of placing that role. So we don't just drop someone in there with any consideration.
And is this a voluntary position, or is this
I believe people put in for it.
Okay.
The current officer selected wanted to do, Bria, her name is Bria. She wanted to act part of that unit.
Awesome. Yep.
Additional questions or comments?
Mine is to piggyback on Commissioner Sabi's, and that's to make sure that we are addressing the total cost. So I think that's what Commissioner Sabi was is the total cost of that officer being that person that's at housing, the total cost.
Okay.
And,
that would be a change to, I think, what the current.
And are we being accusated? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the officer that is being selected is a City of Brunswick police officer. So the city does have a duty to adequately equip that off regardless. She would serve her role, even I know she's signed to the housing authority, and I understand what the assistant city manager said. And I think the point he's made also goes both ways. She can, if necessary, respond to calls within the vicinity of the housing authority properties if there's a necessity for a bat or something along those lines. So we equip that person, and the contract is clear as a result of insurance and liabilities that at all time the property of the officer is considered City of Brunswick property. So it's something that the city would be, required to do as we hire the officer and bring them into the police department. But I mean, I don't think the reason not to at least take a look at this and have a conversation with not only the police chief, but also perhaps housing authority to see if we can maybe work that in and show, because there is on it that says any expenses are incurred by the city is included in reimbursement. So.
Yeah. And to reiterate is that my assumption is that we have never asked for any reimbursement of salary and benefits. And yes, we have to them as Brunswick, city police officers, right? But if the housing authority were to hire another private entity or another entity to serve in this role, they would have the expense of equipment and stuff as well. So it's just fuel, or maybe it's some new radios or whatever the case be. But I think we at least need to, we're doing a contract renewal. It's time to take a look at everything and make sure that we're getting our fair share.
Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Only one I have is 7.2. Sworn police officers shall be and hereby are vested with the power to enforce applicable ordinances and or regulations of the city or BHA. I'm trying to imagine what BHA regulation would need to be listed by a officer.
I mean, it could be related to they have their own regulations as to the safety of the property.
Okay.
And if it was related to either a move in or a move out, an eviction process or something along those lines, that the city officer would be able to equally enforce whatever that rule might be.
Okay. Okay. I just, what I want to guard against is any appearance that our officers are heavy-handed in a space that should be being handled by BHA staff or something to that nature. I don't want an officer showing up to a door on something that could be handled internally.
Right. I think I would look at it more if the issue during a move in, move out, where there was a question of whether or not trespass or criminal trespass, or if there was a keeping the peace.
Gotcha. Okay. Any additional questions? With that, for a motion.
All right, I'd like the motion that we approve the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Brunswick and the Brunswick Authority.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first and second, all in favor, show by the sign of aye.
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 All those opposed, the same. Hearing the motion passes. We'll now move on to number 6. Consider approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Brunswick, Glenn County, and the Georgia Ports Authority to utilize the Joint Safety Communications Department for public safety calls related to the Georgia Ports Authority.
And before I move on, I will just state, based on Commissioner Sabian, Mayor Pro Tem's points, when I forward this to Housing Authority, the previous agreement, will make a note to state that we would like to have a conversation related to expenses. It is the intergovernmental agreement between Georgia Ports Authority, Glenn County, and the City of Brunswick. This is related to the Joint Public Safety Communications Department. For those that are not familiar, the city and the county created this JPSCD. It is our 911 center, essentially. And over the years, the initial parties created it, only being the city and the county. As you are aware, there are other police departments or law enforcement agencies within our jurisdiction that need to be included in this. So there have been amendments over the years to include the college, the GSP providing services to Jekyll Island, the school boards, police department. And in that allowance, and what is typical in these agreements is that the entity seeking to utilize the 911 call center essentially will cover the cost and expenses of any additional radios that are necessary. And this agreement, the Ports Authority has their own internal police department law. So that governs how those calls will be handled, and those that would come in from the school board or from Jekyll Island, and how they're routed. It might find out first. Most the on their agenda at their next to approve as well. But through county legal, Georgia Ports Authority legal, and
Brian, is an example of this being used like when we had a fire at the port and all people got that notice. So
yes.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Any questions or comments? We can open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we entered into this intergovernmental agreement between the City of Brunswick, Glenn County, and the Georgia Ports Authority to utilize our joint public safety communications department for public safety calls related to Georgia Authority property.
Hearing the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing the first, second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you.
We'll now on to number 7. Consider approval of an intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Brunswick and Glenn County related to the repairs of Howard Coffin Park pool facility.
So, as you see, it's actually a commission action memo prepared by the Assistant Parks and Rec Director. To the setup that was done 2 years ago, I believe. The county has obviously granted county commissioners discretionary funding spent as they see fit. The Commissioner Rafali contracted with the city to provide a portion of his discretionary funding placed to the benefit of city parks and squares downtown, I believe, sidewalks. So this is a similar request from Commissioner Booker, who has allotted $20,000 towards certain improvements that have been identified at the Howard Coffin Pool. So the IG you see after the memo is identical to the IGA that we utilized when Commissioner Rafalski placed his funding in the directed spent on those projects downtown.
Perfect. I hate that Commissioner Booker is here. For the record, I do want to say a big thank you to him choosing to invest not only in this, but also choosing to invest in Howard Coffin Park, which has received a lot of investment and a lot of attention over the past little bit. But I know this $20,000 will be used to really rehab and remake a certain area park that we all love. It's a park he grew up in and his family grew up in. So without him being here, I want to say a huge thank you to Commissioner for dedicating those funds to the children and families of the city of Brunswick. With that, is there any questions or comments?
It'd be covered with these costs.
Wonderful.
And we'll execute before completing these repairs, we'll get the check from the county.
Yes,
Money
that
in
is how this goes.
hand. All right. With that, we'll open it for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the intergovernmental agreement by and between the city of Brunswick and Glenn County related to roads of Howard Coffin Park Pool Facility.
Here the first, do I hear a second?
Second.
The first and the second. All those in favor show by the sign of aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We will now move on to item number 8.
This is my final item of the night.
There we go. Consider approval of amendment to the employment agreement between the city of Brunswick and city manager Regina McDuffie.
Yep. As the commission aware, the city manager position is one of 3 contracted positions that the city commission is responsible for governing the contract and negotiating those terms. This amendment sets forth certain amendments to compensation and deferred compensation at the request of the city manager. I think the commission is familiar with these terms and conditions, so I would just place it before you and am prepared to answer any questions related to those.
Any questions or comments?
Just want to make clear, the only things that are presented here tonight, this amendment is agreement is what we are accepting.
Yes, only those that are identified in this amendment.
Okay. Want to make sure.
Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the amendment, to the employee agreement between the city of Brunswick and Miss City Manager Regina McDuffie.
Hearing a first, do I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those. Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. All those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Hearing none, the motion passes. And anything for executive session?
I don't have anything for executive session.
My goodness. With that, we'll open it for a motion to adjourn. Unless you guys want to
Motion to adjourn.
Hearing a second.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor show by the sign of aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Hearing none, the motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.